The thing about survival in the vast expanse of space is that every species with enough brain cells to achieve faster-than-light travel has come to the same brilliant conclusion: when things get dangerous, you run. You run fast, you run far, and you absolutely do not stick around to see what happens next. This universal truth had been codified into what the interstellar community called the Preservation Protocol, a set of guidelines so obvious that calling them guidelines felt generous. They were more like common sense written down for species that occasionally forgot they were mortal. The protocol was simple: detect threat, calculate survival probability, and if that probability dipped below 70%, you evacuated faster than a Grexian politician abandoning a sinking campaign. This approach had served the galactic community beautifully for approximately 12,000 standard years. Casualty rates during exploratory missions had plummeted. Insurance premiums for scout vessels became almost reasonable. Everyone agreed that the Preservation Protocol was perhaps the finest achievement of interspecies cooperation, right up there with standardized docking ports and the treaty that banned weaponizing black holes. Then humans joined the galactic community, and as with most things involving humans, the situation became complicated in ways nobody had anticipated. Planet Verath 9 was by all accounts a thoroughly unpleasant rock spinning through space with what could only be described as anger management issues. Its atmosphere didn't just have weather, it had atmospheric tantrums that would make a supernova look like a mild sneeze. The planet was mineral-rich, scientifically fascinating, and completely uninhabitable for any species with a functioning sense of self-preservation, which made it perfect for a standard survey mission: drop down, scan the interesting bits, leave before the planet remembered you were there. The survey team consisted of 3 members, each selected for their expertise, and more importantly, their ability to follow the Preservation Protocol without having to think about it. Krix, the insectoid navigator, possessed compound eyes that could spot danger from 17 different angles simultaneously. His species had evolved on a death world where everything was trying to eat everything else, which meant his flight instinct was so finely tuned it practically qualified as precognition. Melos, the amphibian exobiologist, came from an aquatic civilization that had mastered survival through the ancient art of knowing when to swim away very quickly. And Thornwick, the crystalline communications officer, was literally made of silicon-based compounds that could shatter under extreme stress, which gave him a very personal investment in avoiding dangerous situations. They had been on Verath 9's surface for approximately 3 hours, collecting geological samples and atmospheric data, when Krix's antenna started vibrating in a way that roughly translated to "oh no, oh no, oh no." Ionic disturbance forming at bearing 270, Krix announced, his 17 eyes suddenly focused in the same direction, which was never a good sign. Category 7 Tempest. Time to surface impact 42 minutes. Melos dropped his sample container. Category 7. The atmospheric shear alone will register at 9,000 kilonewtons. We need to evacuate immediately. Thornwick's crystalline surface flickered with amber warning colors. Shuttle prep initiated. Pre-flight systems coming online. Estimated launch window, 8 minutes. We will depart with time to spare. This was the Preservation Protocol in action, smooth as lubricated gears. Threat identified. Response calculated. Evacuation initiated. The team moved with practiced efficiency, decades of training and instinct guiding every movement. Equipment was abandoned where it stood, because equipment could be replaced. Lives, generally speaking, could not. Then Jackson Reeves, the human xenogeologist assigned to their mission, looked up from the rock formation he had been examining with what could only be described as mild interest. "Category 7, he said, as if someone had just mentioned there might be light drizzle later. "Should be interesting." Krix's antenna stopped vibrating and went completely still, which was somehow worse. Interesting is not the correct emotional response to Category 7 ionic tempests. Terror is the correct emotional response. Possibly existential dread. "We must board the shuttle now," Melos added, his skin shifting to panic yellow. "The preservation protocol is absolutely clear on this matter." Jackson stretched, joints popping in a way that made Thornwick's crystalline structure resonate with sympathy pain. The human checked his wrist device, squinting at the atmospheric data with the casual interest of someone checking the time. He was tall by human standards, with the kind of weathered face that suggested he had spent significant time outdoors in conditions that would make most species file complaints with their environmental regulatory committees. "You all go ahead," Jackson said, already unclipping equipment packs from his harness. "I'm going to wait this one out." 3 different species, 3 different evolutionary backgrounds, 3 completely different biochemistries, all managed to express the exact same emotion, pure distilled disbelief. "Wait it out," Krix repeated, his translator struggling with the concept as if the words formed some kind of logical paradox. "You cannot wait out a Category 7 ionic tempest. The survival probability is 8%. 8, that is 4% less than twice 4%. The wind speeds will exceed 200 meters per second, Melos said, pulling up holographic data, as if showing Jackson the numbers would somehow make him see reason. "The electrical discharge will be continuous. The atmospheric pressure will fluctuate by 30%. Your human body will not survive." Jackson was now pulling out what appeared to be rolled sections of reinforced fabric and lightweight alloy poles. "Probably not if I just stood here. No, that would be stupid." "Then you agree we must evacuate," Thornwick said, his surface brightening with relief. "No, I mean I need to set up shelter first." Jackson dropped the equipment pile and started sorting through it with the methodical patience of someone assembling furniture on a lazy afternoon. "Can't just wait in the open. That really would be suicidal." The preservation protocol had been written and rewritten by committees representing 473 different species over 12 millennia. It had been refined through countless scenarios, stress-tested against every conceivable danger, and translated into every known language with painstaking attention to detail. Nowhere in its 17,000 pages did it contain a subsection on what to do when a crew member decided to have a picnic in lethal conditions. Krix approached Jackson, his translator set to maximum empathy settings. "I understand humans are a young species, recently introduced to space travel. Perhaps the dangers are not fully understood. Let me explain the preservation protocol." "I know the protocol," Jackson said, clicking 2 poles together with a satisfying snap. "Danger shows up, you leave. Sensible approach for most situations. Then why are you not following it?" Melos asked, genuinely confused. Jackson looked up, and his face had that expression humans got when they were about to say something they considered profound, but which would probably just confuse everyone else. Because sometimes running is the right answer, and sometimes you dig in and weather the storm. That's how humans have always done things. Your species' historical approach to survival is not relevant to current atmospheric conditions, Thornwick pointed out, which was logical but seemed to miss something fundamental about how humans processed reality. "You ever heard of the Dust Bowl?" Jackson asked, still assembling his shelter. The poles were forming a dome framework with surprising speed. 1930s, Earth, Massive drought, dust storms that blacked out the sun. Lot of people left, went looking for better places, but some stayed. Built windbreaks, learned new farming techniques, waited for the rain to come back. My great-great-grandmother was one of them. And did it work? Melos asked. Eventually, yeah. Took years, but the land recovered. Jackson pulled out sheets of reinforced polymer fabric. Point is, she could have run, probably should have, by your protocol. But she knew the difference between a threat you run from and a threat you just endure. Krix's 17 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep confusion. And you believe a Category 7 ionic tempest is a threat you endure? Got about 35 minutes to find out, Jackson said cheerfully, anchoring the first fabric panel to the frame. You should probably head up to orbit before the atmospheric distortion makes shuttle launch dicey. The next 10 minutes were a masterclass in frustrated urgency. The alien crew members tried reason, then appeals to emotion, then increasingly desperate descriptions of exactly how Jackson would die if he stayed. Jackson listened politely to all of it, while assembling his emergency habitat with the kind of casual competence that suggested he had done this before, possibly multiple times, possibly in conditions that were equally inadvisable. The fabric cannot withstand sustained 200 meter per second winds, Melos insisted, running his scanner over the shelter. The material stress calculations are clear. Fabrics rated for 300 in optimal conditions, Jackson replied, driving anchoring stakes into the rocky ground with a pneumatic hammer. And I'm not setting up in optimal conditions, I'm setting up smart. See that rock formation? He pointed to a large outcropping 30 meters away. Windbreak. Storms coming from the west, shelters on the east side. Not taking the full force. The ionic discharge will electrocute you, Thornwick said flatly. Jackson patted the shelter fabric. Faraday cage weave. Charge distributes across the surface, doesn't penetrate. Old technology, but it works. The pressure fluctuations will cause internal hemorrhaging. Krix tried. Shelters double-walled with pressure compensation. Got a regulator that'll keep internal atmosphere stable. Jackson tested an anchor point, nodded in satisfaction. Look, I appreciate the concern, really. But I've weathered bad storms before. Different planet, same principle. The shuttle engines were warming up, their whine cutting through the increasingly aggressive wind. The storm was visible now on the horizon, a wall of dark clouds shot through with electrical discharge that looked like the universe had decided to hold a rave in the sky. It was beautiful in the way that natural disasters often are when viewed from a safe distance, which was rapidly becoming not this distance. Final call, Krix said, his voice carrying a note of resignation. Board now or the launch window closes. Jackson waved without looking up from his work. I'll be fine. Radio me when you're in orbit. I'll let you know how it goes. The three aliens exchanged looks that transcended species barriers. They had all seen the same thing, a crew member making a terrible decision based on cultural stubbornness and an overinflated sense of capability. But the preservation protocol was also clear that you could not force evacuation on unwilling crew members. Free will remained protected, even when that free will was being monumentally stupid. Your death will require significant paperwork, Thornwick said, which might have been the crystalline version of expressing care. Do my best to minimize your forms, Jackson replied. The shuttle lifted off in a blast of displaced air and engine thrust, rising rapidly to beat the advancing storm. Krix, Melos and Thornwick strapped into their seats, watching through external cameras as Jackson became a small figure far below, still working on his shelter as the sky turned the color of bad decisions. How long do we give him before declaring him deceased? Melos asked quietly. The storm will last approximately 6 hours, Thornwick said. Survival beyond the first hour is statistically improbable. Krix's antenna drooped. Humans, they achieve spaceflight, master fusion power, develop faster than light engines, and then they do this. The shuttle broke atmosphere and assumed orbital position. Below, Verath 9's surface was already being consumed by the storm. A maelstrom of wind and lightning that looked like the planet's atmosphere had decided to have a violent argument with itself. Jackson's voice crackled over the radio, startlingly clear. Shelters complete. Got it buttoned up just in time. You should see this view. The lightning is incredible. In the shuttle, 3 sets of eyes and sensors focused on telemetry data. The readings showed wind speeds that would peel paint off a starship hull, electrical discharges measuring in gigawatts, and atmospheric pressure doing things that pressure really should not do. In the center of that chaos, one small shelter's beacon showed green for operational. The readings must be malfunctioning, Melos said. Nothing survives in those conditions. Shelter integrity at 97%, Jackson reported, his voice carrying an infuriating note of satisfaction. Pressure compensation working as designed, little loud but manageable. Define manageable, Krix said weakly. Oh, loud enough that I'd have trouble sleeping, but fine for staying awake. Speaking of which, anyone fancy a cuppa? Thornwick's crystalline structure flickered in confusion. A cuppa. Translation systems are failing, T. Jackson clarified. I'm making tea. Got a portable heating unit and everything. Takes about 4 minutes to boil, assuming the pressure compensation doesn't mess with the water's boiling point too much. Silence in the shuttle. Below, the storm raged with increasing fury, the kind of meteorological event that planets use to remind visitors they are not welcome. And somewhere in the middle of it, a human was making tea. This is not happening, Melos said to nobody in particular. This violates several laws of survival. Pretty sure it just violates common sense, Krix replied. Over the next hour, Jackson Reeves provided running commentary on both the storm and his beverage preparation. The alien crew, who had expected to be mourning their human colleague by now, instead found themselves listening to detailed observations about ionic discharge patterns, wind shear coefficients, and the relative merits of Earl Grey versus English breakfast in high-stress situations. The Earl Grey has a nice bergamot note that pairs well with existential danger, Jackson mused. His environmental readings were being transmitted continuously, providing data that no species had ever collected, because no species had been insane enough to remain in a Category 7 tempest. English breakfast is more robust, but sometimes you want subtle. Melos, despite himself, was recording everything. The scientific value of real-time atmospheric data from inside a major ionic storm was unprecedented. His horror at the methodology was battling with his excitement at the results. Electrical discharge frequency is holding steady at 0.3-second intervals, Jackson continued. Shelter's Faraday weave is distributing the charge perfectly. Bit tingly if you touch the walls, but nothing dangerous. You are touching the electrically charged walls? Thornwick asked, his voice climbing several octaves. Just once. Scientific curiosity, not recommended for extended contact. Krix was reviewing the structural data from Jackson's shelter, trying to understand how it was surviving conditions that should have shredded it minutes ago. The design was elegant in its simplicity, each element compensating for the others. The anchoring system used the planet's own rocky substrate for stability. The pressure compensation system borrowed technology from submarine design. The Faraday cage weave was centuries-old Earth technology that still worked perfectly. Your shelter design is highly efficient. Krix admitted grudgingly. Did you develop this specifically for Verath 9? Nah, this is standard emergency gear. Used something similar on a mining colony during a methane storm, and once during a sandstorm on Mars before they terraformed it properly. Jackson's audio feed captured the sound of liquid being poured. The trick is understanding what you're protecting against. You can't stop the storm, so you work with it. Working with a Category 7 ionic tempest is a contradiction in terms, Melos said. Is it though? The wind wants to blow, so I'm not standing in its way. The lightning wants to ground itself, so I'm giving it a path that doesn't go through me. The pressure wants to equalize, so I've got systems that equalize with it. I'm not fighting the storm, I'm just not letting it kill me. There's a difference. Thornwick processed this for several seconds. That is the most human approach to survival I have encountered. Thanks, I think. As the storm reached its peak intensity, the shuttle's sensors recorded wind speeds exceeding 230 meters per second and lightning strikes occurring every quarter second. The atmospheric pressure was fluctuating wildly, creating zones of compression and rarefaction that would rupture unprotected biological tissue. It was, by any objective measure, one of the most hostile environments in the surveyed galaxy. Jackson took a sip of his tea and declared it slightly oversteeped but still acceptable. I am filing a report recommending that humans receive supplementary training on the preservation protocol, Krix said, his antenna vibrating with stress. Already took that training, Jackson replied. Passed with high marks. I know when to run. This just isn't one of those times. How can you possibly determine that? Melos asked, genuinely trying to understand. The survival probability calculations are clear, because those calculations assume I'm trying to move through the storm or escape it. I'm not. I'm staying put, letting it pass over me. Different scenario, different math. Another sip of tea. Plus your probability calculations don't account for human stubbornness, which is worth at least 10% on its own. The storm raged for 6 hours, just as predicted. For 6 hours, Jackson provided atmospheric data, geological observations, and occasional updates on his tea supply. He also, to everyone's surprise, collected several valuable mineral samples that the storm had helpfully excavated from deeper rock layers. The wind's doing the mining work for me, he explained. Just have to wait for interesting rocks to tumble past and grab them with the collection drone. Very efficient. You deployed a collection drone in Category 7 winds? Krix asked weakly. He was beyond surprise now, existing in a zen state of accepting that humans were going to human regardless of circumstance. Small one, yeah. Tethered it to the shelter, gets knocked around a bit, but it's built sturdy. As the storm began to subside, transitioning from unsurvivable to merely extremely dangerous, the alien crew prepared to descend back to the surface. They expected to find wreckage, possibly a few scattered remains, and definitely a lot of apologetic reports to file with their superiors. What they found instead was Jackson Reeves standing outside his shelter, dumping out the last of his tea, while examining a geological sample with evident satisfaction. The shelter behind him was not only intact but had been improved. He had built a small rock wall on the western side, additional windbreak for future storms. A collection of mineral samples was neatly organized on a flat stone, labeled with marker tags. And he had built a small rock garden, because apparently surviving lethal atmospheric conditions was not enough activity to fill 6 hours. Welcome back, Jackson said, waving. Storm passed about 20 minutes ago. I was just tidying up. Krix's antennae had given up trying to express emotion and just hung limply. You built a rock garden. Got bored around hour 4. The storm sounds are kind of meditative once you get used to them. Figured I'd do something constructive. Jackson gestured to his arrangement of stones. It's based on old Earth Zen gardens. Supposed to promote calm contemplation. Melos approached slowly, his scanner checking for signs of injury, psychological breakdown, or human duplication. Jackson appeared to be completely fine. Better than fine, actually. His vital signs indicated he was more relaxed than when the storm had started. "You are uninjured," Melos said, his scientific training struggling with his evolutionary instincts. "This should not be possible." Shelter worked perfectly. Pressure compensation kept me comfortable. Faraday cage handled the electrical load, and the anchoring system held firm, exactly as designed. Jackson picked up his sample collection, also got some great specimens, found what looks like crystallized fulgurite from ancient lightning strikes. Should be worth analyzing. Thornwick extended a sensor tendril, examining the shelter with something approaching respect. "Your engineering is sound. I had not anticipated human emergency equipment would be so robust. We tend to prepare for worst-case scenarios," Jackson said. "Comes from living on a planet that's tried to kill us in pretty much every way possible. You learn to build things that last." On the shuttle ride back to the main ship, Krix attempted to file his mission report. He stared at the blank form for 10 minutes before finally typing, "Human crew member remained in Category 7 ionic tempest. Survived. Built rock garden. Please advise on documentation procedures." The response from command came back surprisingly quickly. "Clarification needed. Do you mean the human sheltered nearby and observed the storm, or entered the storm? Please provide accurate report." Krix typed slowly. "Human was in the center of the storm for 6 hours, made tea, collected samples, constructed decorative landscaping. Shelter integrity maintained at 97% throughout. All statements are accurate. Human is uninjured and in good spirits." The next response took longer. Report flagged for review. "Human crew member to undergo psychological evaluation. Command wants to understand decision-making process." Jackson, reading over Krix's shoulder, laughed. "Tell them the decision-making process was simple. Stay dry, stay safe, stay productive, plus the tea was really good." Back aboard the main vessel, Jackson's emergency shelter was thoroughly examined by engineering teams who wanted to understand how it had survived. The design was elegant, the materials were standard, and the entire system was based on principles that any species could have developed. But only humans, it seemed, would actually use it in conditions where the preservation protocol screamed to run. Over the following weeks, Jackson's atmospheric data was analyzed and reanalyzed. He had collected information that filled gaps in meteorological models. His geological samples included minerals that had not been observed in their natural state before. His rock garden was documented in the mission report, because nobody could figure out how to exclude it without the entire report sounding fictional. A quiet recommendation began circulating through the scientific community. When surveying high-risk planets, consider including a human team member. Not because humans were better at following safety protocols, but because they occasionally ignored them in ways that produced scientifically valuable results. The preservation protocol remained unchanged, its 17,000 pages still advocating for the sensible approach of removing yourself from danger. But a small footnote was added, buried in Appendix 73, subsection 12, human crew members may require additional latitude in interpreting survival probabilities. Recommend supervisors account for species-specific cultural approaches to risk assessment. Also recommend adequate tea supplies. Jackson Reeves went on to complete 17 more planetary surveys, surviving 3 additional major storms, 2 volcanic events, and 1 incident involving aggressive crystalline life forms that nobody liked talking about. His emergency shelter design became standard equipment for human exploratory teams, who appreciated that it came with a built-in tea brewing station. Krix eventually learned to stop arguing when Jackson decided to wait out dangerous conditions. The human's survival rate remained stubbornly at 100%, which was statistically improbable but practically undeniable. Melos published 4 papers based on data Jackson collected during inadvisable exposure to extreme conditions. Thornwick developed a new respect for soft species engineering, even if he never quite understood the appeal of tea. And somewhere in the galactic archives, filed under xenological oddities and cultural peculiarities, there exists a report describing how humanity joined the interstellar community and promptly confused everyone by redefining what preservation actually meant. It turned out that sometimes preserving yourself meant running from danger, and sometimes it meant planting your feet, building something sturdy, and waiting for the universe to calm down while you enjoyed a hot beverage. The universe, for its part, continued to throw storms and disasters at anyone foolish enough to explore it, and humans continued to respond by packing extra tea bags, just in case.